Before the land ever showed its teeth, it sent a warning. Not a whisper, not a plea, but a force that scraped bone and breath alike. On the West Texas plains, the wind did not ask permission, and neither did fate. Grant Mallister learned that lesson the morning. The sky turned the color of old bruises, and the past came riding straight at him through dust and snow. The wind never whispered across the West Texas plains. It cut and carved, stripping warmth from a man the moment he stepped beyond his door. On that gray, swollen morning, it shoved dust and sleet across Lone Mesa like the land itself was trying to drive. Grant Mallister back the way he'd come. He rode with his collar turned up, Bramble's hooves crunching through red clay mixed with slush, every step ringing sharp in the cold. The wind burned his cheeks raw. The quiet pressed in heavy and close, the kind that made a man feel watched. Then he saw them. Two shapes crouched beneath a dying cottonwood, motionless as grave markers. Two women, alone in weather that could kill cattle. Grant slowed without meaning to. His heart kicked once, hard and uneasy. Why here, why now? And why did it feel like something long buried inside him was clawing its way back to the surface? As he rode closer, the picture sharpened. One woman stood upright despite the wind tearing at her thin shawl, her posture proud even as her hands shook. The other sat on a battered trunk, head bowed, like she'd left whatever strength she had somewhere miles behind them. Bramble tossed his head, sensing trouble. Grant steadied him with a hand and stopped a dozen yards away. His fingers brushed the worn grip of the Colt at his hip, habit more than threat. "Ma'am," he called, tipping his hat against the stinging snow, his voice rough from too many quiet years. "Looks like you're in trouble." The standing woman lifted her chin. She looked to be around 30, maybe a little more, with high cheekbones and gray eyes that once must have held fire. Now they held exhaustion and resolve in equal measure. Her dress was plain and black, widow's colors, and even the storm seemed to hesitate around her calm. "That would be an understatement," she said evenly, though her hands trembled. "Our wagon lost an axle a mile east. The driver took his pay and said he'd return from town." She swallowed. "Yesterday morning." Grant's jaw tightened. He knew the sort. Men who abandoned women when things turned hard. "He ain't coming back," Grant said flatly. "Not in this." The younger woman lifted her head then. Grant didn't know her name yet, but she looked like trouble and fire wrapped in human skin. Narrow face, sharp lines, green eyes full of suspicion and worn-down pride. Her hair had come loose, whipped wild by the wind. "We'll manage," she snapped, though her voice shook despite her effort. The older woman placed a gentle hand on her arm, a silent request, a quiet yielding. "We don't have money for a room," she said softly. "We were hoping to reach Rusted Hollow and find work." Grant's gaze dropped to the trunk. One sack, two women with almost nothing to their names. They were near frozen, the way cattle were when found too late in a storm. His gut twisted. He didn't want this. Didn't want complication, memory, or softness creeping into the iron solitude he'd built his life around. He should have ridden on, left them to walk. Pretended he didn't see trembling hands or skin burned raw by wind. Sarah's hands flashed through his mind, cold and fragile, the way he used to warm them between his palms by the fire, whispering promises of spring. The memory cut deep. Leaving these women would be a death sentence. Grant let out a long breath. "My ranch is closer than town," he said. "Lone Mesa's a couple miles back. It's warm and dry. You can stay till the storm breaks." He paused, needing control. "You can work for your keep." Relief hit the older woman so hard she nearly swayed. The younger one's eyes softened, but only a fraction. Something guarded still burning there. "Thank you, sir," the older woman whispered. "I'm Mara Elwood. This is my sister, Liza." "Grant Mallister," he said. "Get your things. Liza, you ride up front. Mara, you'll ride behind me." The ride back passed in silence except for the wind. Liza sat stiff in front of him, cold seeping through her coat. Behind him, Mara clung to the saddle, her grip weak from hunger. Her scent, soap, lavender, and hardship, felt foreign against his world of leather and dust. When the cabin finally emerged from the white swirl, Grant felt an unexpected jolt. It looked smaller somehow, lonelier with two women riding toward it. He helped them down. Mara felt almost weightless, her strength nearly spent. Liza landed firm and pulled away the moment her boots hit the ground. Grant pushed open the heavy door. Cold air and darkness greeted them. The fire was dead. "It ain't much," Grant muttered, suddenly aware of how bare his life looked. "But it'll do." The cabin was one room. Stone hearth, narrow bed with a buffalo hide, a table, one chair, a saddle stand by the door. No curtains, no rugs, no softness. A life built with no expectation of anyone returning. Grant rebuilt the fire until flames climbed high. "There's stew," he said. "Eat. I'll tend the horse." He fled to the barn like a man escaping a fight. The smell of hay and warm animals steadied him. He brushed brambles slowly, delaying the moment he'd have to face what he'd brought home. When he returned, Mara was washing dishes at the dry sink. Her movements careful, her hands shaking. Liza sat by the fire, shoulders tight, eyes sharp with thought. They ate quietly, Mara slow and deliberate, Liza fast and hungry. For 3 days, the storm trapped them together. Mara softened the cabin with small, steady touches. Liza followed Grant outside whenever she could, restless as a caged colt. One afternoon, Grant stripped his wet shirt in the barn and caught Liza frozen in the shadows, staring at the scars on his back. Her cheeks flamed before she fled. Something shifted then, small and dangerous. On the 4th day, the storm broke. But the real storm had only begun. The storm peeled away from the West Texas sky as abruptly as it had come, leaving behind a world scrubbed raw. Mud lay thick as dough beneath the sun. Fences sagged under melting snow, and the silence stretched wide enough to make a man uneasy. Inside the Lone Mesa cabin, the air felt changed too. Not lighter, not heavier, just waiting. Grant had barely stepped outside that morning when Mara appeared beside him, holding a folded shawl, her breath coming short from ribs that still ached. She'd worked herself thin trying to repay his kindness, and he could see it in the tight set of her shoulders. "You don't have to help men fence," he said gently. Mara lifted her eyes, soft but unyielding. "A deal is a deal, Mr. Mallister." Liza came next, already pulling on her boots, movements sharp and purposeful. She didn't look at her sister. She didn't look at Grant. She grabbed a coil of wire and strode toward the fallen fence line with a fury that didn't fit a woman of 22. Grant knew better than to ask. Some questions lived better unspoken. Their answers carried in the silence between people shaped by loss. The work was brutal. Mud sucked at their boots. Wind cut along the ridge, wire bit cold fingers. Grant drove posts deep into softened earth, muscles straining with every swing. Liza braced them, jaw clenched, arms shaking with effort she'd never admit. Mara moved steadily along the line, rethreading barbed wire with practiced patience. Her hands wrapped in cloth, her breath shallow. She winced now and then, just barely, and every time Grant felt a tight pull in his chest, he refused to examine. He taught them without thinking. How to read tracks, how to brace before hammering, how to check a calf's eyes. The lessons spilled out natural as breath, and they learned with a hunger that surprised him. Mara absorbed knowledge quietly, gratefully. Liza devoured it. Something bright and dangerous burning stronger in her eyes the more she learned. By the 4th morning, the sky lifted clear and smelled of thawed earth. Grant spent half the day repairing a cracked beam in the barn. Sweat soaked his shirt despite the chill. When the work was done, he stripped the damp fabric off without thought. He sensed it before he saw it, a sudden stillness behind him. Liza stood near the ladder, feed sacks forgotten in her arms. Her eyes weren't guarded now. They were wide, searching, unshielded. The barn held its breath. Her gaze moved over him. Not bold, not crude, but curious. A young woman seeing a man simply as a man. Color climbed her neck. She dropped her eyes too late. When they met his again, she spun and fled, sacks spilling behind her. Grant stood frozen, heart pounding, shirt clenched in his hands. That look stayed with him long after she was gone. That evening, the silence inside. The cabin roared. Liza paced near the window, jaw tight. Mara mended a pillowcase, movements careful. Grant cleaned his rifle, though it didn't need it. When he finally sat near the fire, Mara joined him. "You should be resting," he murmured. "I will," she said softly. After a moment, she added, "Liza's young. She says things she doesn't mean." Grant nodded, though the memory of Liza's gaze said otherwise. Mara's needle paused. "It's hard to be young in a place like this," she whispered. Grant stared into the fire, seeing Sarah's face in the flames, the tremble of her hands. "You don't have to be strong every minute," he said quietly. A breath escaped Mara, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "And you don't have to be alone every minute," she whispered. He couldn't answer. Alone was all he knew. And suddenly he wasn't. As days passed, glances lingered too long. Steps drew closer than necessary. Grant felt them both, Mara's steady warmth and Liza's restless pull, and it scared him more than any storm. When Rusted Hollow finally came back into reach, necessity forced his hand. The flour bin rang hollow. He hitched the buckboard, planning to go alone, but Mara stepped forward for thread, and Liza climbed aboard without a word. In town, eyes followed them. Whispers rose. Mara shrank beneath her bonnet. Liza sat tall, defiant. The trip ended quickly, but the damage lingered. That night, Mara told Grant she would leave. He argued, but she shook her head. Liza returned with water and exploded, accusing her sister of always running. "I want to stay," Liza said, voice raw. For him, the words fell heavy. Liza fled. Grant found her in the barn, moonlight cutting sharp lines across her trembling form. She demanded he deny what she felt. He couldn't. She touched his cheek and kissed him, soft and desperate. A floorboard creaked. Mara stood in the doorway, eyes wide with hurt, then vanished into the night. Everything Grant had tried to hold together shattered in that moment. Grant stayed awake long after the lamps burned low, guilt clawing at him until his chest ached. The cabin felt hollow, emptied of breath. At last he crossed to Mara's cot. She lay facing the wall, eyes open, tears sliding silently into her hair. He knelt beside her. "Mara," he whispered. "I'm sorry." She didn't answer. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I don't know how to do right anymore. I didn't choose her. I didn't choose you." His voice broke. "I've been alone too long, and now—" "You both live in here." He pressed a hand to his chest. Her breath trembled. Slowly, her hand found his, cold and shaking. "We're survivors, Grant," she whispered. "All three of us. And sometimes living true matters. More than living right." The words turned, like a key in a rusted lock inside him, and the storm they'd all been holding back began to rise. The night felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, silent and dangerous. Grant didn't sleep. By dawn, the world shifted again. Liza's cot was empty, her blanket folded tight. Mara sat up, fear flooding her face. "She wasn't here when I woke," she whispered. Grant was already pulling on his boots. The mare was gone. Panic hit him hard. He saddled Bramble with clumsy urgency and rode hard toward the western ridge. The sky cracked open with lightning. Thunder split the air. Bramble reared and Grant hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Rain soaked him. Bramble fled, but Liza was still out there. Grant staggered up, teeth clenched, and followed the faint tracks uphill. The climb burned through him, but he pushed on. At the cliff's edge, he saw her, sitting with her legs dangling over empty air, shoulders shaking. "Liza," he called softly. She turned, relief and heartbreak colliding in her eyes. "You found me," she whispered. "I'll always find you," he said, the promise tearing out of him. She told him she'd heard everything, that she couldn't stay and watch him. Choose Mara. He stepped closer, despite the slick ground. "Don't talk like that," he said fiercely. She confessed wanting him from the start, the pain of it unbearable. Grant knelt beside her, rain soaking them both. "You matter," he said. "I can't lose you." She warned him not to promise what he couldn't keep. He kissed her instead, desperate and fierce, rain falling like baptism around them. For a moment, there was only them at the edge of the sky. It took 2 days to get back. Grant leaned on Liza as she guided Bramble. When Lone Mesa came into view, Mara waited on the porch. She saw them, Grant supported by Liza, and something in her eyes broke quietly. That night, silence filled the cabin. Liza tended Grant's bruised shoulder with hands that claimed without words. Mara watched, then set plates down gently. A decision passed between them, unspoken but real. Days passed slow and fragile. Grant healed, but the deeper bruise lingered. No one spoke of leaving. No one spoke of the kiss. Spring pressed heat into the earth, and something dangerous grew between them. Then the drought came. Cracks split the dirt wide enough to swallow a hand. Grass withered. Cattle thinned. Grant worked until his shoulders screamed. Mara forced him to rest, breath shallow from her own strain. Liza rode fence lines alone, sunburned and fierce. They moved like one body, bound by survival. Until the afternoon, Grant collapsed, fixing a trough. Pain flashed white, then darkness. When he woke, the cabin smelled of fear and boiled pine. Mara hovered, voice shaking. Liza sat at the foot of the bed, eyes swollen from crying. He'd been out 2 days. The fever broke that night. Grant woke to firelight. Mara washed his brow. Liza knelt nearby, guarding him from death itself. "We didn't know if you'd wake," Mara whispered. "I'm here," he said. Liza sobbed softly, warning him never to scare her again. When Mara finally spoke, her voice was steady and broken. "We're stronger together." Liza looked at her sister. "You don't hate me. I love you," Mara said. "And we both care for him." Grant closed his eyes. Overwhelmed by warmth, he thought lost forever. "I don't know what the world will say," Mara whispered. "Let them talk," Liza said. Grant looked at them and felt something return inside him, fragile and alive.